Tonight at 10, the Prime Minister warns that the UK's new coronavirus variant may be more deadly than the old one. Boris Johnson says new research suggests a rise in the number of people dying from the new strain.
There is some evidence that the new variant, the variant that was first identified in London and the South East, may be associated with a higher degree of mortality.
Heathrow Airport this afternoon amid fresh concerns about new variants from abroad. The Prime Minister warns tighter measures may be needed to protect the UK's borders. Also on the programme tonight, there's good news from the vaccination programme. Almost 5.5 million people have now had at least one dose of the vaccine, including more than 70% of people over 80. Devastation in Brazil. More than 200,000 have already died. We report from the epicentre of the country's worrying new coronavirus variant. Removing dangerous cladding. More than 3.5 years after Grenfell, fewer than half the residential tower blocks identified as dangerous by the government have had work completed. And a wedding in intensive care. A happy ending for the nurse and her fiancé as hospital staff helped them to tie the knot.
And coming up in sport on BBC News, 3 wickets for James Anderson. But England are made to work hard on the opening day of the second test against Sri Lanka.
Good evening. The Prime Minister says there is some evidence that the new variant of coronavirus spreading across the UK could be more deadly than the original strain. Government scientists said for men in their 60s, out of every 1,000, around 10 infected with the old virus would be expected to die. But with the new variant, that number has now risen to 13 or 14. The government's chief scientific advisor, Sir Patrick Vallance, said there's a lot of uncertainty around the numbers, but it is of concern. There was good news on the vaccination programme, with a record number, more than 400,000 first doses administered in the past 24 hours. But Boris Johnson warned that the infection rate is still forbiddingly high, and he said he can't consider lifting restrictions in England until the vaccination programmes are working. With more, here's our health editor, Hugh Pym.
It's been another frantic week for hospitals like this one at Clacton in Essex. More COVID beds have been set up to try to meet the surge in patient numbers. While most pull through, some don't. Now there's news that a new variant of the virus, which first spread in the southeast of England, could be more deadly than the first strain.
We've been informed today that in addition to spreading more quickly, it also now appears that there is some evidence that the new variant, the variant that was first identified in London and the South East, may be associated with a higher degree of mortality.
In the light of the new information, do you expect the daily reported death toll to carry on rising for longer than you'd first thought and then fall more slowly?
The death rate's awful. And it's going to stay, I'm afraid, high for a little while before it starts coming down. That was always what was predicted from the shape of this, as Chris has said. And I think the information about the new variant doesn't change that. Not entirely sure.
He said there was still uncertainty about the death rate with the new variant and more research was needed.
Which is all I had. My dads have already passed away, and me and my mum, we were the closest.
Eleanor's mother, Sandra, died with COVID in hospital last week. She was 61 and had an existing health condition. Eleanor says her mum took every precaution.
Mum was doing everything she needed to do. You know, she wasn't going out unnecessarily. She was always, sanitising, wearing her mask. Because I'm one of them people that thought it wouldn't touch my family, but here I am, absolutely devastated and without my mum.
So what's the outlook for new cases? A study by the Office for National Statistics does random testing and includes people who don't know they have the virus, as well as those with symptoms. The latest survey of community infections by the ONS suggests that in England last week, 1 in 55 had the virus, with case rates having decreased. In Wales, it was 1 in 70, with rates levelling off. In Scotland, 1 in 100, again with case rates having levelled off. In Northern Ireland, 1 in 60 had the virus, with rates increasing. The R number range, anything above 1, suggests the virus is accelerating, was between 0.8 and 1, lower than the previous estimate. This week, the government tightened border controls and quarantine rules to try to limit the risk of new variants getting into the UK. Crowded scenes like this at Heathrow today will no doubt fuel the debate on whether further measures are needed. A new government ad campaign launched this evening aims to ram home the message to the public of the extreme pressures on the NHS and the impact of the virus.
And Hugh is with me now. So the UK's new coronavirus variant, we've got new research on that. How worried should people be?
Well, Sophie, health officials have been stressing this evening that this is very preliminary research. More data needs to be collected. Sir Patrick Vallance made that point. It needs to be monitored. But he did say it was potentially a concern, though not at the moment for anyone to get especially worried about it. It was something that I think they felt they had to get out there so people knew what this new variant was looking like in terms of the mortality risk. Better analysis, though, in terms of a more positive story, comes on the vaccines, with a suggestion by Sir Patrick Vallance that actually they're quite effective against this new variant as much as they are about the old strain of the virus, which is reassuring. But he did go on to say that in terms of other variants, the Brazilian and the South African variant, there was a potential issue about the vaccines not being as effective as they might be, though again, more research is needed on that.
And there's good news on the vaccination programme, with millions of people now being vaccinated. But there's pressure on the government tonight over the second jab for the Pfizer vaccine.
Yes, originally when Pfizer was approved in early December, there was supposed to be a 3-week gap between the first dose and the second. That was all agreed. Then when Oxford AstraZeneca was approved at the end of December, the policy changed, so there would be up to 12 weeks between doses. The argument being made, and Chris Whitty made it again today, that it was much better to vaccinate as many people as possible, double the number, and actually the greater amount of protection was with that first dose. But the British Medical Association, representing doctors, says it's increasingly concerned about this. The association says it's out of line with other international practice, including the recommendations of the World Health Organization. And in a letter written to Chris Whitty, which I've seen, they are calling for an urgent review of this decision and moving that 12 weeks back to 6 between doses.
Hugh Pym, thank you. Well, our Deputy Political Editor, Vicky Young, is in Westminster. And Vicky, we saw the pictures from Heathrow and Hugh's report. Thousands of people still arriving amid concern about new variants coming from abroad.
Yeah, and interestingly today, the Prime Minister talking about the measures that are already in place, saying broadly that he thought that that was enough, apart from dropping a very heavy hint about doing more to protect the borders. Now, there will be, I understand, a meeting on Monday of senior ministers to discuss this. And I think the most likely option to come out of that is going to be the idea of people quarantining in hotels, something that we have seen in other countries. Now, that's the stricter measures. As for unlocking, well, the Prime Minister today saying what he's going to be looking at before he can consider doing that. Now, one thing is to see that that vaccination programme is working very well. There has been great progress there, but he says that is not going to be enough. And it's this infection rate, which he described as forbiddingly high. That is the risk, that you start unlocking too soon and the whole thing rebounds again. So there will still be this review in just over 3 weeks' time. He's made it very clear schools would be the first to open, but he's going to do it extremely cautiously.
Vicky Young, thank you. The latest government figures show there were 40,261 new coronavirus infections recorded in the latest 24-hour period. So 38,270 new cases were reported every day on average last week. There were more than 38,500 people in hospital with coronavirus in the 7 days to this Wednesday. Another 1,401 deaths were reported. That's people who died within 28 days of a positive COVID-19 test. On average, in the past week, 1,241 deaths were announced every day. The total number of deaths so far across the UK is 95,981. The UK's programme of mass vaccinations continues to ramp up with a new daily record for the rollout. More than 400,000 people have had their first dose of one of the 3 approved COVID-19 vaccines in the latest 24-hour period. It takes the overall number of people who've had their first jab to more than 5.3 million. Well, the government is counting on the vaccination programme to get us out of lockdown, but there is one vital question that scientists can't yet answer. Will people who've had the jab still be able to pass the virus on? Our science editor David Shukman looks at the current evidence surrounding transmission.
Rolling out the vaccines at a gathering pace marks the first big turning point in the pandemic, each one creating more protection against the disease. But there's something crucial we don't yet understand. If you've been vaccinated, can you still get infected? You'd be safe if that happened, but could you spread the virus to others?
We don't know for sure at this moment in time whether if an individual is infected after receiving the vaccine, they can transmit that to others. So the best thing to do is to presume that it's possible. So if someone is pinged because they've been in contact with somebody who has infection, then they should self-isolate in the same way that they would have to if they had not had the vaccine.
We do know from the trials that the injections work remarkably well. They boost the production of antibodies that flow through the bloodstream to provide a key form of defence. So if the coronavirus does get in, the antibodies should block it from entering any of our cells. In addition to that, what are called T cells should provide another layer of protection. But there's no guarantee that any of this will stop an infection in the upper airway, with the virus taking hold and you releasing it. There's nothing confirmed about these risks after vaccination, but it is plausible you could still get an infection without symptoms. That's when you don't feel ill but could still be a carrier. In that case, you'll probably have lower levels of the virus inside you than if you hadn't had the vaccine, and a shorter infectious period when you're a risk to others. Even so, it is still conceivable you could spread the virus in your household, for example, to people you're close to and spend most time with. The vaccines coming off the production lines were tested for how they keep people from getting ill, not whether they'll still be infectious. So the advice is to remain careful, even though there's a good chance of a positive effect.
The most likely scenario is going to be that the vaccines will reduce how much virus is in a person, even if they get infected, and make it less likely the person would pass the virus on to anybody else.
And this may be relevant to the lockdown and when we get out of it. Scientists who are trying to predict the spread of the virus say it's vital to know if vaccination slows that down.
If it has a significant impact on transmission, then we'll be able to relax measures faster than if it doesn't. I'm hopeful that we'll be able to see some relaxation, at least getting out of lockdown in the March timeframe. But it will be very much a gradual process from then through to the end of the year.
So how the vaccine programme goes is crucial in so many ways. First, for saving lives, but also for helping to shape the future course of the pandemic. David Shukman, BBC News.
Some of the hardest hit by this pandemic are those living in overcrowded housing with high levels of poverty. Areas with a large proportion of black and other ethnic minority households have also suffered. Parts of East London have had the highest COVID rates in the whole of the UK. Our social affairs correspondent Michael Buchanan has been to a mosque in Newham in East London, which has been forced to stop everything except its funeral services and food bank.
We've had so many bodies coming in.
The ubiquity of death should not diminish the dignity of the dead.
Just now we've just washed somebody who it seems like she's passed away in the ambulance, so she didn't even make it to the hospital.
These women wash COVID-positive bodies prior to burial, a sacred Islamic ritual.
We actually believe that when we're shrouding here, God is shrouding the soul at the same time.
They're volunteers, a teaching assistant and a full-time mother, but their job is becoming increasingly difficult.
So if somebody comes in, and this happens quite often, with catheters still attached and tubes still attached and resuscitation equipment still attached, we learn how to deal with that.
Normally the family would tend to their relatives, but COVID has denied them that honour, deepening their grief.
Please keep your social distancing up 2 meters, do not hug, do not shake hands.
This funeral for a 49-year-old woman was one of 7 organised by the mosque last weekend. All services are free. As one family departs, another arrive to view the body of their father and grandfather. 2 days ago, 72-year-old Bashir Alam died, another victim of COVID.
If
this corona wouldn't be here, my dad could have been lived for another 10, 15 years, easily. But corona is killing people.
I'm on my way to get my COVID vaccine, inshallah.
In an effort to tackle disinformation, the mosque's imam, who's been furloughed, has received a vaccine to prove it's not un-Islamic.
Please come and get your vaccine done to protect yourself, your loved ones, and those who are around you. Jazakumullah khairan kathira.
At the mosque, the pandemic has forced them to not just care for the dead, but also tend to the living.
We are not only providing this funeral service, we also have food banks.
Just feet from the small mortuary, they store food to feed hundreds each week, a service demanded by the pandemic.
1 milk, please.
Mohammed Rahman lost his job in an Indian restaurant 3 months ago. It's left the father of 2 penniless.
No money. My son is chicken teeth. No money, no honey. The shop is open, but no money.
Friday prayers here would usually attract 1,100 people. But for the moment, physical solace matters more than spiritual comfort.
The mosque is a community hub. Prayers, yes, it's important. The need of the community is they want to be fed. They want a place where, they can bury their loved ones.
For this mosque, debating whether COVID is a health or an economic crisis is futile. It is both, and it is real. Michael Buchanan, BBC News, Newham in East London.
Figures out today show Britain's debt reached an all-time high last month as the economy continues to reel from coronavirus. Government borrowing reached just over £34 billion in December after public sector bodies borrowed £2.5 billion more in December than the month before. It means that the public sector has now borrowed almost £271 billion since the beginning of the financial year in April. Public sector debt keeps rising. By the end of December, it had reached more than £2 trillion, an all-time record. More than 3.5 years after the deadly Grenfell Tower blaze, new figures show work to remove similar style cladding on residential tower blocks has been completed on fewer than half of the buildings that have it. The government identified almost 400 tower blocks in England alone that needed cladding removed. It says good progress is now being made, with work started, if not completed, on almost all of them. Ministers say that's a significant milestone, but residents say it's taking far too long. Sarah Corker reports.
We have the same cladding that was on Grenfell.
Another day trapped in an unsafe home.
The bill for this.
Flat owners like Amy were told in 2017 that this block in Sheffield had dangerous cladding. But repair work only started last month and progress has been slow.
The government seem to think that it's OK for 3.5 years and they've literally just started to take a few panels off. It's not good enough.
While the government's Building Safety Fund is paying for this cladding to be removed, the building has other fire safety faults that are not covered by the fund and could cost more than £6 million to fix. So flat owners are now facing repair bills of up to £50,000 each. Where do the shortfalls in the fund leave you?
Financially unstable, in a position where we could go bankrupt, not just me, but all the leaseholders. And I'm stuck in a building that's effectively unsafe, and it's absolutely terrifying.
The £1.6 billion building safety programme was set up to remove Grenfell-style cladding. Ministers say 95% of blocks have had it taken off or repairs are underway. But analysis of new data shows that work has been completed on just 58% of social housing, while in the private sector, cladding repairs have been finished on only 30% of blocks. And those applying to the fund, usually building managers or owners, are concerned about parts of the contract. The problem is there's a clause in here that says they'll have to pay for any repair works not covered by the fund, so an unknown and potentially huge cost that's likely to be passed on to flat owners.
It's a growing national scandal.
This solicitor specialises in housing law and warns the fund doesn't go far enough.
The scheme is significantly oversubscribed and underfunded, The result of that is somebody's going to need to pick up the bill. And who's that going to be? The contract makes clear that it's going to be the leaseholders. And that could potentially be tens of thousands of pounds, which of course could be ruinous.
And these huge costs and delays are paralysing parts of Britain's property market.
More than 50% of the valuation requests we get through we're unable to deal with. Because they're unsellable. A lender will not lend money on those properties.
The government refused our request for an interview, but told us significant progress has been made removing dangerous cladding, and ministers continue to press building owners to make homes safer. But those living in flammable flats say it's taking far too long. Sarah Corker, BBC News in Sheffield.
The Scottish Parliament is for the first time seeking to use legal powers to compel the country's prosecuting authority to hand over documents it wants in connection with its inquiry into the Scottish Government's handling of harassment complaints against the former First Minister Alex Salmond. The documents include messages between an SNP official, civil servants and advisers relating to Mr Salmond's legal challenge to the complaints process. A 14-year-old boy has been arrested on suspicion of murdering a 15-year-old in Birmingham. Keon Lincoln was attacked in broad daylight in the Handsworth area of the city yesterday afternoon. Witnesses reported seeing a group of youths armed with knives and hearing gunshots. Sean Lloyd reports.
Keon Lincoln, described as a beloved son who was full of life. Police said he was subjected to inconceivable violence. The 15-year-old was attacked yesterday in the middle of the afternoon. This mobile phone footage was recorded soon after. Forensic officers today continue to examine the street in the Handsworth area of Birmingham where it happened. Witnesses saw a group of young people carrying knives and shots were heard. Police officers tried to give first aid before the ambulance arrived, but Keon died shortly after being taken to hospital.
This is a 15-year-old boy who has been murdered in the streets of Birmingham, and our belief is that the other people responsible for it were also round about that age, and we know we've got a 14-year-old lad who's been arrested.
His attackers fled in a white car which crashed into a house a short distance away. Why they targeted Keon isn't yet known. People living here are shocked.
The cycle of violence on our streets is of major concern. We've been seeking ways to make our streets safer for a number of years. Our thoughts and condolences go out to the family of the young man.
The 14-year-old boy remains in custody. Police believe others were involved. Keon's family are grieving a teenager who they remember as fun-loving with an infectious laugh that lit up a room. They're asking anyone with information to come forward. Sean Lloyd, BBC News.
Brazil has the second highest coronavirus death toll in the world, and the country is struggling with a new variant of the virus and a devastating second wave. Manaus in the Amazon rainforest is at the epicenter. It's where the new strain was found. Its hospitals can hardly cope. Brazil has started vaccinating people, but any relief from this virus feels a very long way off. From Manaus, here's our South America correspondent, Katie Watson.
This is not the first time Manaus has been brought to its knees. In the cemetery, a reminder of the first wave, where digging mass graves was the only way to keep up with the number of people dying. The biggest city in the Amazon, people here feel forgotten, again, and the second wave is worse. Last week, the city's overwhelmed hospitals ran out of oxygen. Supplies are still patchy. Now people queue at local gas companies in the hope of keeping their loved ones alive. Don't despair, says this company representative. Cylinders are now being delivered across the city. But Elke is terrified. She's had to leave her mother at home with no oxygen to come here. She only has this one cylinder.
A gente compra, a gente paga imposto. Aí na hora que nossos pais precisam, não tem, a gente tem que estar se humilhando para eles viverem. Para viver, a gente precisa se humilhar para manter um ente querido vivendo. Não tem vaga para ela. Aí vai para lá, não tem oxigênio lá também. Eu vou deixar ela morrer lá.
Local volunteers like Marcel have stepped in to help bring oxygen to those who need it. He's looking after 5 people, making daily oxygen runs, but it's taking its toll.
Tem uma pessoa que eu conheci, ela morreu. Aí disse que faltou oxigênio. Eu falei, não faltou oxigênio, faltou falar comigo. Porque se falasse comigo, eu não morria. Porque eu ajudaria, se eu soubesse. Eu teria feito chegar o oxigênio lá. Meu amigo, muitos anos, foi saber mandar, ela morreu. Morreu. Não tem necessidade, ele morreu sem necessidade, asfixiado.
Doctors are concerned the new variant found in the Amazon region is overwhelming already packed hospitals.
Normally, there are 8 beds in here, 1 patient to each room, but in the past few days, doctors have had to double that. Each patient now shares. There are 16 beds, and they still have to find space to grow.
Jaime is the oldest here at 77. His survival, says his son Fabio, is down to luck. The rest of the ward is full of young people. This woman's 23. Next to her, a man in his 30s. It's shocked doctors here.
Here in Manaus, we have the epicenter here now, but in other parts of Brazil, this new strain is going to go. So thank God the vaccination's already started.
There's concern, though, that vaccines aren't getting to those who need them. But as we prepare to leave, some good news. Jaime reacts to his family for the first time since he became ill. A rare glimpse of hope in otherwise dark times here. Katie Watson, BBC News in Manaus.
Let's take a look at some of today's other news now, and the impeachment trial of former President Donald Trump over his role in the deadly storming of the US Capitol building is expected to begin early next week. Democrats say the articles setting out the charge against Mr. Trump will be sent to the Senate on Monday. 4 men have been sentenced to between 13 and 27 years in prison for the manslaughter of 39 Vietnamese migrants whose bodies were found in the back of a lorry in Essex in October 2019. The Old Bailey heard the victims suffered excruciatingly painful deaths when they suffocated in the container, bringing them to the UK from Belgium. The future of Nissan's car plant in Sunderland has been secured, with the company saying the Brexit trade deal will allow it to continue manufacturing in the northeast of England and give it a competitive advantage. Nissan will begin making the batteries for its electric cars at the plant so that it can take advantage of zero trade tariffs, helping to secure 75,000 jobs here and across the UK. Now, they were the last non-league team in the FA Cup. Chorley put up a spirited fight against the Premier League's Wolverhampton Wanderers tonight, but it wasn't quite enough as they were knocked out in the 4th round. Andy Swiss was watching.
So would Victory Park once again live up to its name? To get this far, Chorley had overcome some big clubs and some grim weather, even inflating a giant tent over the pitch to ensure tonight's game went ahead. And in their sights, one of the biggest shocks in FA Cup history. The part-timers are 5 divisions below Wolves. Their manager, Jamie Vermiglio, is a primary school head teacher. But when PE coach Elliot Newby went close after barely 30 seconds, anything seemed possible. Wolves, though, aren't in the Premier League for nothing. Just watch this.
Vitinha to drive one in here and swerved all over the place.
It was Vitinha's first goal for the club, and as the replays confirmed, he'll do well to score a better one. But Chorley hung in there, and after the break they gave the visitors an almighty scare. Suddenly Wolves were wobbling, only their keeper John Ruddy keeping the underdogs at bay in often acrobatic style.
Well, and Halls was there as well.
And agonisingly, that equaliser just wouldn't come. Wolves winning 1-0 with their only shot of the night. So close for Chorley, but their thrilling FA Cup run is finally over. Andy Swiss, BBC News.
And finally, a couple who were both seriously ill in hospital with coronavirus have been married in intensive care just before the groom was put on a ventilator. The couple was supposed to be getting married in June. Staff at Milton Keynes University Hospital found them a vicar and helped them to organise a ceremony complete with a cake and flowers and, thankfully, a happy ending. Sarah Campbell reports.
A wedding photo which tells a story of our time. Simon was about to be admitted to intensive care, his condition rapidly deteriorating. His fiancée Lizzie had been told he might not recover.
My heart broke. To be so ill and be told the person you love, you might not see them again, it's indescribable.
With time running out, nursing staff here immediately set about planning a wedding.
They called in a local vicar who came and did the ceremony in intensive care, and they were absolutely amazing, absolutely amazing.
Bearing in mind all that was going on, what was going through your mind?
We got to make that promise to each other. We got to have something that we didn't think we were going to be able to have.
Against expectations, Simon rallied, and just a day after being taken into intensive care, he was returned to the COVID ward and his new wife.
I was dying to get back to see Lizzie back on this ward, so I tried my best and really fought for my breath back to come back down again.
10 days after the wedding, Simon is thought to be over the worst and Lizzie is due to be discharged. A happy ending for them and for the nurses turned wedding planners.
There have certainly been moments you've questioned, do we stay within nursing? But then you experience something like the wedding and you think, absolutely, if there is anything we can do, it gives you faith to sort of carry on, and it just keeps you going a little bit longer.
And what are you looking forward to as newlyweds now?
We're both looking forward to just sitting at home with a home-cooked meal together. That would be bliss at the moment.
Sarah Campbell, BBC News.
And that's it from us now on BBC One. It's time for the news where you are. Good night.